my name is Sean, and in today's video we're going to be discussing Shaddolls, looking at a deck profile and then some gameplay towards the latter part of the video. But before we go into anything else, I just want to discuss the issue of fusion monsters historically speaking throughout the ages of Yu-Gi-Oh! So when fusion monsters were first a thing in the original version of Yu-Gi-Oh! They weren't really very much played. Unless you were playing like a fan-based deck, like say something like Dark Paladin, nobody really used fusion monsters because they were so expensive to summon. Typically speaking, for a fusion monster, you have to use at least 2 monsters as materials and then also a polymerization style spell in order to summon out 1 monster. Now, if that 1 monster allowed you to immediately win the game, that would be fine, but most fusion monsters don't do that. And so people really didn't think it was worth spending 3 cards to summon out 1 monster, which really was only a little bit stronger than the monsters that you actually use to summon it. They did try to make this a little bit easier by using cards like King of the Swamp, which could be swapped for any kind of fusion material, but it still meant that it was a costly endeavor, and really it wasn't worthwhile doing. The GX era of Yu-Gi-Oh! Tried to make this a little bit better by trying to do archetypes like Elemental Hero, where basically any 2 monsters could be a fusion material, so you didn't have to worry about searching out the right pieces to do the combo. But still, the monsters that you had to summon, or options that you were given, still weren't worth summoning and burning 3 cards for. For example, Elemental Hero Thunder Giant has an effect to destroy 1 monster on the field. But instead of using a polymerization Sparkman and say King of the Swamp to summon it, you could just put Dark Hole, Raigeki, and Mirror Force in your deck, and you'll get a much better value out of than summoning this 1 monster. So the problem with fusion monsters is that they are very, very costly for actually going into the effort of summoning the monsters. So now is the time to introduce Shaddolls and what they try to accomplish. Shaddolls try to circumvent the expensive cost of making a fusion summon by giving you back a reward for going through the effort of doing so. Allow me to demonstrate. So if I were to summon out El Shaddoll Winder using Shaddoll Fusion, Hedgehog, and Shaddoll Falco, what would happen is Falco would go to the graveyard, Hedgehog would go to the graveyard, and then you would summon out Winder. After Winder is summoned, Hedgehog and Falco will both trigger, and Falco will come back to the field, and Hedgehog will allow you to add a different Shaddolls monster from your deck to your hand. So these 2 cards paid for themselves. You didn't lose anything by using them. And then really, the only thing you lost was the cost of the fusion. It was actually playing the spell itself. But then, if El Shaddoll Winder goes to the graveyard from the field, it will then get you back your fusion spell, so you really didn't lose anything by doing that, and you managed to summon a very oppressive monster to the field. And that in a nutshell is what Shaddoll is all about. It's all about sending their cards to the graveyard via effects in order to gain free resources and maintain your card advantage. Now, this is not my deck build, this is the Duelist challenge build, and if you want to try this build or you want to farm the cards yourself, just go to Quattro in the Duelist challenge. I believe he's in the in the Zeal campaign, so you got to go through that first. But once you do, you can keep on beating him, or just click surrender multiple times, and eventually you'll get all of these cards. So if you're looking for where the cards are in the game, that's a really good option for you to go to, but you will have to go find the other ones using a website yourself. So now I want to break down the Shaddoll archetype and talk about its strengths and its weaknesses. The Shaddoll archetype has very, very little overlap between different cores of a deck. Its strongest core is the number of extenders it has. In fact, it pretty much is only just a bunch of extenders, where all of these monsters give you more resources once you've used them for a fusion summon. And your cards are very, very good in terms of that. Even your extra deck monsters extend your plays, because when they go to the graveyard they recover your spells, or they set up other plays like with El Shaddoll Construct by sending more cards to the graveyard. This is the typical kind of like example lineup that people like to play. So if you're looking for what your ratio should be, we should normally have like 3 Wendy, 1 Beast, 1 Falco, double Hedgehog, 3 Squamata, 3 El Shaddoll Fusion, 3 Shaddoll Fusion, 1 Resh Shaddoll Incarnation, and Incarnation, it is Incarnation, and 1 Shaddoll Core is what most people try to use. It's just an example, feel free to mix it up. A lot of people don't like these cards here for good reasons, so try to avoid them in my opinion, but they are kind of useful in some niche situations, so they're not always that bad. Other than extenders though, Shaddolls don't really do a whole lot else, if I may say so. They have no good starter cards. Technically Shadow Fusion could be, but it's really not a starter card. They have no kind of endgame winning cards. Winder can kind of lock down your opponent a little bit, and against certain decks it will be an auto win button, but it's not really designed to be an endgame card. It's more like just slowing down your opponent. And then for removal, our options are still quite limited. Shadow Dragon, when sent to the graveyard, can destroy a spell trap card on the field, and its flip effect can return a card on the field to the hand, but it's still quite slow and you can't really rely on it all the time. And Aerial can banish cards from your opponent's graveyard as well. But then other than that, there really isn't much in terms of, say, on-demand removal cards. So if your opponent has a spell or trap card on the field or a monster, you kind of have to work hard to kind of get to a solution, or go outside the archetype to find a solution. Similarly with defensive cards, there isn't a whole lot there as well. Again, Dragon could be used technically. Winder is very good defensively. You've got Construct as well, but other than that, most of the other cards aren't too effective. So this is why the Shadow archetype is very difficult to build with. It has a lot of extenders, almost no starters, no end game cards, and very few options in terms of removal and defensive things. Furthermore, one other kind of issue with Shaddolls is that Shaddolls are kind of generic quote-unquote fusion monsters, where they take any Shadow monster plus an attribute. So one Shadow plus a water, one Shadow plus a light, wind, dark, etc, etc. But the quality of these cards vary greatly. Construct is easily the best one, and so you want to get light monsters to do it. But things like Wendigo are very, very bad. Now, most of the Shadow cards are Dark type, which only support summoning El Shadow Winder. Konami did see a little bit sense, and in 2019 they released a Shadow Structure deck, which added Ray Shadow Wendy, Chaos, and Aerial, and they are different attributes, wind, light, and water respectively. But there's still a bit of an issue with this. Wendy by far is the best Shadow main deck monster, easily. But because she's a wind monster, her associated fusion is Wendigo, and that's the worst fusion in your extra deck. Similarly, in the opposite way, like I said, Construct is the best one, and it requires you to summon a light monster, so her partner would be Chaos. But Chaos is the worst main deck for Shadow option outside of these Shadow Pendulum cards. So really you don't want to have him, but you don't have a natural way in the archetype to go for the light element. There are ways to circumvent this. You could try using Neath Shadow Fusion, and Shadow Core, but it requires a lot of extra steps to get them going. Shadow Core is a trap card, and you've got to summon a monster, then change his attribute. Or you got to do Neath Shadow Fusion, which is an equip spell card, meaning you have to normal summon a Shadow or summon a Shadow to the field, equip it with this, and then make a fusion summon as well. It's just a lot of extra steps that make running this deck even harder to do so. So that's the Shadow archetype in a nutshell. It rewards you for making fusion plays, but outside of that, and it has lots of extenders, but outside of that, it runs into the issues of having very few starters, no kind of win condition, very few options in removal and defensive cards, and you have to find element cards in order to summon the cards that you really want to summon. So, this deck needs the support of additional cores, and I want to give you some ideas of what you could potentially run with a Shadow deck, and then I'm going to show you what I've chosen to run. And then that way, if you don't like what my build is, you can swap it out with a different core. The first one is the Invoked core. Alistair the Invoker is one of the best engines in the game. It's a monster that when you summon it, can add Invocation, a fusion spell card, from your deck to your hand. This is really good because it's very efficient to do so, and you can actually search out Alistair using Magical Meltdown, a field spell card, which can then be searched out with Terraforming. So Terraforming into Meltdown, into Alistair, into your fusion spell. It is very, very good for searching out a spell card. The kind of downside, quote unquote, is that Invocation can only summon a Shadow extra deck monster by using materials in your hand. It can't use cards on the field to do so. It can only use cards on the field and also the graveyard to summon out an invoked monster. So be aware of that. That is a bit of a limitation with this card. But the engine overall is really, really nice. The invoked monsters provide you a variety of options. You've got Mechaba, which is a defensive card. Raijin can be an offensive card. There are many things you can do with this deck, and it complements it very, very well. In addition, Alistar, when it is on the field, can go into Almirage, which is a fire monster, which can help you make Grista a bit easier, or it can go into Secure and Purgatory, I should say. And then Almirage can be used to go into Secure Garner, which is a light monster, which can help you make Construct and Mechaba, both decks' best cards are light monsters, quite easily. The reason why, one more thing is about Instant Fusion as well. Instant Fusion works for both archetypes, but I want to talk about that later on. The only reason why I'm not choosing to go for the Invoked archetype is because I think the best Invoked deck in this game right now is the Mech Knight Invoked deck. I think Mech Knights being light monsters complementing the Invoked engine so very well. They might even work with Shadow cards, but they kind of prefer to win games quicker, and Shadows are quite slow, so I'm not using them either. And I think if you're going to play an Invoked deck, the best thing to go for is Mech Knight Invoked, in my personal opinion. Then, instead of using Invocation as your spell card, you could go for Polymerization instead. And Polymerization is really good because unlike Invocation, you can use cards on your hand and the field. But also, there's another card called Fusion Substitute, whose name is always treated as Polymerization, meaning anything that says you can search out Polymerization or has Polymerization in its text, you can use this card too as well, instead of an actual Polymerization card. You are limited to only 3, so you can't do more than this, so you have to choose how many you're going to use or which ratio. I like doing a 1-to-2 one. But why play Fusion Substitute? Fusion Substitute can only fusion summon monsters on your field, which is a downside. However, when this card is in the graveyard, you can banish it to return a fusion monster in your graveyard to your extra deck, allowing you to then summon it out again later and draw a card. So it kind of allows you to pay for itself by kind of not just sitting in the graveyard. So it's there as a good option, and I think having at least one of the two is always kind of the way to go. Now, Polymerization is nice because it is searchable through a lot of different cards. Namely, it can be searched out using Elemental Hero Blazeman. When summoned to the field, you can add one card to your hand. Of course, being an Elemental Hero card, you can then search that out with things like Stratos, which is nice because it gives your deck an option to destroy spell and trap cards on the field. And then that can be searched out using Emergency Call or Reinforcement on the army. So this is very consistent, and it allows you to get to a fusion spell and or destroy a spell and trap card on the field, and gives you a fire monster and a wind monster if you want to go into Wendigo or Grista. Don't go to Wendigo. You can make Grista, it's not that bad. Alternatively, you could also play Fusion Recycling Plant. This is a field spell where once per turn you can discard one card, add Poly from your deck, and then during the end phase, if you fusion summon this turn, you can add back a monster you used as a fusion material. Now this is nice because it doesn't just work on the invoke cards, it allows you to recycle some of your generic starters. So let's say you use Blazeman to make Grista. During your end phase, you could get back your Blazeman thanks to Fusion Recycling Plant, summon it again, and search out another Polymerization. So it's a kind of like a nice little loop there. Or even do it with Stratos and destroy more spells and trap cards if you want to, or add a monster. There's a lot of potential in this. I kind of really like this option here. Of course, also the Elemental Hero monsters, so you could make Great Tornado, Escuriado, or Absolute Zero by using Ariel, Chaos, or Wendy as well, or any Shadow card. So you do have a few options here. Mainly, I like Great Tornado because it can half the attack of all your opponent's monsters, or Absolute Zero because it can destroy all cards in the field when it leaves the field, all your opponent's monsters. So really nice options for this core there if that's what you want to do. Instant Fusion and Super Poly are both very good options as well for a Shadow deck if you want to play them. Instant Fusion is fantastic because it can summon out Winder directly. It could also, in an Invoked engine, summon out Caliga or Raijin directly. And then you can also do things like summon out a light monster like Panzer Dragon, or which can then destroy a card in the field, or play Mud Dragon of the Swamp, who is a card that can change its attribute to whatever you want it to be and make it so that your opponent cannot target monsters with the same attribute. This is nice because it can go into basically any Shadow card, and all you have to do is pay 1,000 life points to get him on the field. He's also a good target for Super Polymerization as well, and that is also mostly your Shadow cards because they're kind of generic. Furthermore, Instant Fusion allows you to summon out Millennium Eyes Restrict and or 1,000 Eyes Restrict, which can then use their effects and then go into Link Karibo, and then Link Karibo can then go into Secure Garner, giving you a light monster on the field to use to help you get out to El Shadow Construct a little bit easier. This engine and these cards here are very good for Shadows. Going on, there's also Light Swans. Light Swans is a bit of a unique one. You saw it in the Duelist challenge deck, Shadow. They were using Light Swans here. But how Light Swans work is that they are monsters where when they're on the field, they send cards from the deck to the graveyard to do different things. So, but Lila's really nice because while she's on the field, you can change her position to destroy a spell trap card, and she is searchable by Charge of the Light Brigade, so it gives you an option there. And then Raijin is a level 4 tuner, and being a level 4 tuner, you can send 2 cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard, hopefully triggering some of your Shadow effects, and giving them a tap boost. But then also, being a level 4 tuner allows you to go into some synchro summons. So you can make things like Black Rose Dragon with Wendy, or you could go into Borolo Savage with your level 4s like Squamata, or who else is a good level 4 Dragon. And yeah, so it kind of opens up options for you if you want to go this route as well. And they're also light monsters which help get the contract a lot easier. Just be aware, if you use your Shaddolls for a Link monster, a Link summon, or a Synchro summon, it won't trigger their effects, so it's up to you if you want to go that route. The final option I want to talk about is the more generic option, and we have Dark Referent Armageddon Knight, which when summoned can send a dark monster to the graveyard, a different way of triggering your cards without using this fusion spell. Mathematician is almost a staple in Shadow decks because it sends any level 4 or lower monsters to the graveyard, triggering most of your Shadow effects. But also, people like to run it with a little performance engine by sending Damage Juggler to the graveyard, which is a light monster. You can banish this card to add a performance card from your hand to from your deck to your hand, like Performance Trick Clown, giving you a quick way to get to a light monster. Performance Trick Clown is really nice as well because when it's sent to the graveyard, you can summon it back to the field by paying 1,000 life points, so you can use it again and again and again. Hatricker could also be used sometimes. It isn't a light monster, it's an earth monster, and Shikinaga isn't as good as Contra, but it's not too bad. It's got really good stats. And then it can summon itself to the field if there are 2 or more monsters on the field, helping you to go into, say, Link summons, or even rank 4 plays a little bit easier. So this is the generic engine. So, if you want to play Shaddolls, feel free to use any of these sub-engines if you don't like my build, but here is my build that I'm using in the video today. I'm actually playing a trap variant of Shaddolls. We are using the Armageddon and Mathematician stuff, but I'm not using Hat-Tricker, and our Shadow ratio is 1 Aerial, 1 Chaos, 3 Wendy, 1 Beast, 1 Dragon, 1 Falco, 1 Hedgehog, 3 Squamata, and then we're doing 3 El Shadow Fusion, 1 Foolish Burial. We're doing the Instant Fusion package because I think it's insane. Reinforcement in the army, Shadow, and 3 Shadow Fusion. And then let me go on to our traps. I noticed that Shaddolls had a card, Sinister Shadow Games, which is a lot like, if I go to a different deck, reminded me a lot of my Burning Abyss deck, which uses Fiend Griefing to send a Fiend monster directly from your deck to the graveyard. Well, Shadow Sinister Games allows you to send a Shadow card from your deck to the graveyard. So I thought, why not we try a similar kind of build where we are using Trap Trick, a card that can search any normal trap from your deck and to the field, set it to the field to kind of extend our plays. Trap Trick is a really nice card because it kind of laterally lets you go into different categories, such as being a removal option, being an extender, endgame option, defensive option. It can kind of do a lot of different things in just one card. For example, if you want a removal option, you could do Trap Trick and go into Compulsory Evacuation Device, Heavy Storm Duster, or Paleozoic Dynamiscus. They are all trap cards as well, so you can wait for your opponent and play reactively, so you can use them defensively as well, for things like Torrential Tribute to blow up the field. Blowing up the field is really nice, because in Shaddolls, because you're technically using an effect to get rid of these cards, you will trigger their effects, so blowing up the field isn't so bad for you. And then also, you could search out things like Rest Shadow Incarnation, which then lets you summon a Shadow from your graveyard in face up or face down position, and then when this card is in the graveyard, you can flip it up as well. So yeah, I gave this a go and I kind of like it. I don't think it's perfect, I think there are ways to improve upon it, but we're going to go into a video now and talk about that a little bit more in action. Before I do, let me quickly tell you what's in the extra deck. We have double App Cologne, double Construct, 3 Winder, 1 Millennium Eyes, 1 Mud Dragon, 1000 Eyes, 1 Gravity Controller. Gravity Controller, you're going to see it in the video in a second, but it's used to send one of your fusions from the extra monster zone to the graveyard, so you can on demand get there. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you could target one Shadow spell trap card and add it to your hand effect. We have Nightmare Phoenix, Link Karibo, Predator Plant Verti Anaconda, and Secure Karna. So let's go into some gameplay and I'll show you what this is like in action. So here we are into a game here against Killer 4709, and I'm going to be going first, which is very fortunate because we are playing a lot of traps in this deck. And let's see what traps-based Shadow can do in action. So with my opening hand here, this is not bad. I have two good starters, Armageddon Knight and Foolish Burial, and three really good extenders as well. So this is a decent hand. This isn't a bad hand whatsoever. Looks like I hit my ratios on the mark here with my ratios of starters to extenders. So I went with Foolish Burial first. I always kind of go for the spell-based searches first because you want to see if your opponent has any responses. And he isn't seen stopping me at any point, so he doesn't have a card like Ash Blossom. Shadow is very vulnerable to cards like Ash Blossom. Even Shadow Fusion, your fusion spell, because it has the effect where it can send cards from your deck to the graveyard if your opponent has a monster from the extra deck on the field, that too can be negated by Ash Blossom, even if you're not getting a card from your deck, because it has the potential to do so. So you've got to be really careful about that. In my 60 card build, I was playing cards like Drag Down by the Grave and Call by the Grave to kind of look at your opponent's hand, but that's a thing of the past, and we really don't have a lot of deck space when we're trying to keep this to a 40 card build. So to describe what I just did here for a little bit there, I used Foolish Burial to send Squamata. Then Squamata is a card effect that allows you to send a Shadow card from your deck to the graveyard. I then used it to send Wendy, who summoned a Shadow from my deck, and I think I went for Shadow Beast on my summoned it to the field. And then I went for Armageddon Knight to send Shadow Hedgehog to the graveyard, which added Quay Shadow Chaos from my deck to my hand. Because Chaos is really your main way of getting a light monster out to use into Construct, you really want to make sure it goes off, so you want to make sure you're safe before you go and search it out, because I dread to think what happens if your opponent stops you from using Chaos as your main light monster. Your only other way of getting light monster is going to be through instant fusion. So yeah, make sure you protect that light monster. Once you have the light monster on the field though, and you have one construct out, you're kind of fine because you're now deep into your extenders. So the one construct will help us significantly, but you got to make sure you get there with this deck. So Shadow Construct is really great, and it's the best fusion monster because when it is summoned to the field, it too can then send one Shadow card from your deck to your graveyard. And I didn't actually send a monster, I sent Elf Shadow Fusion. The reason why I did that is because I just used Elf Shadow Construct as a link material for Gravity Controller to trigger her effect that when she goes from the field to the graveyard, she can add a Shadow spell or trap card from our graveyard back to our hand. Now, Shadow Fusion can only be used once per turn, which is why we also use El Shadow Fusion, because that too can only be used once per turn. So we want to have options for getting at least 2 fusion summons per turn. In this build, I'm not playing Polymerization, but you probably will also want other fusion options as well, so you're not just limited to the 2, but for this build, we're only using the 2 cards. We sent Armageddon Knight and then El Shadow Falco to the graveyard to summon out El Shadow Window, one of our best defensive plays when you're going first, because it stops both players from summoning more than once while it's on the field. So we've done our summon, that being Falco. I'm now going to set Trap Trick in the middle column, and I'm going to set Sinister Shadow Games in the left column. In case my opponent is playing Mech Knights, we're not going to make a column for him because that will give him some kind of advantage. So we're going to pass over to Killer 4709. He plays Ignite Reload, which is a card I haven't seen in a very long time. When was the last time I saw Ignite Reload? Oh my god. I think it was when I was playing Metal Foes, and that was a long time ago too. So, he's playing a Pendulum deck. Ignite Reload allows you to put Pendulum cards back in your deck, shuffle your deck, and then draw that many cards +1. So it's a good way of kind of fixing your hand a bit. And now he activates Performer Power Smile Sorcerer. I am just quickly scanning the card to read what it does, and it doesn't really have a relevant effect, but the most important thing here is that its scale is a scale 1. He then activates Performer Pal Celestial Magician, a newer pendulum card for the Performer Pal archetype, which is quite versatile and has a variety of different effects. And that being that right now it's coming out as an 8 scale. So my opponent is about to do a pendulum summon. We have Wind on the field, so it means that once he does his summon, he won't be able to summon again afterwards, which is quite nice. But I kind of want to slow him down as well. So what I'm doing here is I activate Sinister Shadow Games after activating Trap Trick. Trap Trick is going to let us banish one card from our deck, which is going to be Heavy Storm Duster, to set another to our field. But once Trap Trick is activated, you can only use one more trap for the rest of the turn. So I went ahead and used Sinister Shadow Games as well, just to get the effect. And I sent Shaddolls Squamata to the graveyard, I believe. And also Falco is going to trigger as well, because Falco has been flipped up by Shaddolls Shadow Games. So Squamata and Falco are going to make a chain. Squamata is going to send a card to my graveyard, and I'm going to send Shadow Dragon to the graveyard. I'm just checking if there's anything else I want to do. Rest Shadow could be really good to do as well. We're not going to really be attacking the graveyard in this game, so Ariel is going to have very limited uses. But I'm going to send Shadow Dragon, and then we're going to activate Falco's effect, which can summon back a Shadow card in face down the res position when it's flipped face up. It's nice because we just got back our Construct, which is going to float later on, getting us more cards from the graveyard, and it's a light monster, so we can make another Construct with it on the field. And then Dragon's effect is kicked off so that it will destroy one spell attack card on the field. Now, when you're playing against Pendulums, you kind of have to gauge which scale is more important to them. It depends on your knowledge of Pendulums, but he's got a very high scale and a very low scale, so I thought let me go for the low scale and destroy that, see what happens. He then played Duelist Alliance and added Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon from his deck to his hand. And now he's activated Dragon Oath Magician, which is a 2 scale. And with his new scales on the field, I'm now going to activate Heavy Storm Duster. I think this is really a good demonstration of why I wanted to play the Trap Trick engine in this deck. It feels so many versatile resource slots. On demand now, I just want to destroy spell and trap cards. I use Trap Trick and get that out of my deck. I felt like no other core kind of provides you that flexibility. Not even the Evoked core, personally, in my opinion. Sure, maybe I could have summoned Mechabar, but then I needed monsters in my hand. It's just, I felt like this was just a lot more flexible, and I very much value flexibility in Link Evolution when you play 1v1 games. My opponent just activated Pendulum Call, the best Pendulum starter in the game, where you discard one card and add any 2 Pendulum Magician cards from your deck. And also it protects it from destruction as well. So he managed to get 2 new scales pretty much, and now he's definitely going to have a way to do his Pendulum Summon. But at least we got rid of a lot of his extenders, a lot of his setup cards. So this is going to be his one summon really. And this is kind of one of the downsides with Pendulums as well. So Dragon Caller, not Oath Dragon, my apologies, I called it Oath Dragon. Dragon Caller is summoned from the extra deck, and Odd Eyes is going to be summoned from the hand. Now, for those who don't know or didn't play the original version of Legacy of the Duelist, when you Pendulum Summon, you, historically speaking, could summon up to 5 monsters to the main monster zones. But when Master Rule 4 came around and they introduced the Link mechanic and the extra monster zone, you could only summon directly from the extra monster deck to that one zone. So it really hurt Pendulum cards. But at the same time, it also hurt Fusion decks, XE decks, and Synchro decks. Basically saying, if you want to use those cards, you have to play Pendulums. Now, in Master Rule 2020 or Master Rule 5, what we're currently playing as, they reverted that rule. So Fusion monsters, Synchro monsters, and XE monsters can now be summoned back to the main monster zone. But they didn't do it for Pendulums. They did Pendulums wrong that way. So Pendulums are very limited in what they can and can't do. I just want to point out that he used his Odd Eyes to attack my Gravity Controller. Odd Eyes, when it does damage, does double damage to any monster it does, so it is a very good endgaming card sometimes. But Gravity Controller cannot be destroyed by a battle by cards in the main monster zone, so it's a nice defensive option as well. Also, we can use its effect if we wanted to attack a monster, and it will return it and that monster back to both players' hands. So it's kind of like Neo-Spacian Grandmo in a way, where it can also be used as a form of removal. He's a good little card, Gravity Controller, and he's a nice easy way to trigger your Shadow cards and get them into the graveyard. Now, the reason why I'm taking so long here is I'm trying to decide what is the best play. I've used Shadow Fusion, and because my opponent controls a card from that was summoned from the extra deck in the extra monster zone, I'm able to use cards in my deck for the fusion summon of Shadow Fusion, so I'm sending them directly. This is a really powerful thing to do for Shaddolls, and so we send Wendy and Squamata to make El Shaddol App Cologne. App Cologne is also a new card. When you look at Shaddolls, you'll notice that they all had one Shadow monster plus one attribute. Well, El Shaddol App Cologne is a little bit easier to do because it's just any two Shadow monsters as long as their attributes are different. So Wendy's a really good target for it because you can trigger her effects as well. And then a bunch of effects are going to happen right now. When App Cologne hits the field, you can choose one card in the field and negate its effect. That is permanent. That just goes on as long as that card remains face up. Its effect will be negated. And I'm just having a quick read of the pendulum cards here to see if they have any relevant pendulum effects. They don't really, to be honest with you. There really isn't a good target for this to do, but I am just having a read. It's always good to read your opponent's cards and just quickly skim over it. Eventually, reading can be very difficult for some people in this game because the game can be very wordy. But eventually, you'll see certain clauses like once per turn or you can only use this effect once per turn kind of thing. You'll see those phrases again and again, and so it'll help you with speed reading the cards a little bit and scanning them what they do. It just takes time to get used to it. Now, App Cologne is really nice as well, because App Cologne's second effect is that you can add one Shadow card from your deck to your hand, and then discard one card. So we're going to do that in a second, but what I just did was use Squamata's effect to send Rest Shadow Incarnation to our graveyard, because we're really kind of running out of cards in our deck to send to the graveyard. We've kind of burnt through a lot of our resources, and I thought Rest Shadow would be a really good card to go for. Now, Rest Shadow has a graveyard based effect. You banish itself and one Shadow card from your graveyard to flip up one card on your field. We summon Nail Shadow Aerial using Wendy's effect, and Nail Shadow Aerial has an effect where when it is flipped up, you can then summon a card from the Banish pile. This is a nice interaction between it and Rest Shadow Incarnation, where basically you banish the monster that you want to summon back with Aerial. So I banished my Winder because I knew I was going to be able to summon it back to the field. And once again, we are in a field full of monsters, and Winder is live, so he's only going to be able to special summon once in the next turn. Construct, when it attacks a monster, it attacked Odd Eyes, it automatically destroyed it. App Cologne is stronger than Dragon Caller, and then we attack for 1000 damage with Gravity Controller, and we're going to pass to our opponent. So, we did a lot in this turn, a lot of things happened here. I don't think I used App Cologne's effect. I'm just thinking about that now. What I did do though is I am making a mistake right here. This is me botching up the thing. I completely forgot. I am human, I do this too. I forgot that my opponent last turn used Pendulum Call. Why is this relevant? I did say it earlier, but I'm going to say it again. When Pendulum Call is used, until your opponent's next turn, they cannot destroy your Pendulum cards with effects. So, I use Nightmare Phoenix to try and destroy it, and I'm like, crap, I wasted that material. But that's okay. We've got a lot of cards in the field. All of our El Shaddol cards, when they go to the graveyard, if my opponent somehow gets them to the graveyard, will give us more resources back. The other downside of what I did by doing Nightmare Phoenix, and I was laughing at myself here, is Nightmare Phoenix is pointing to his 4th column main monster zone. That's giving him an extra zone to summon from his extra deck. So he's going to get Dragon Caller Magician, and he's going to get Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon again. So he's gotten back his 2 cards. That being said, this is all he can do for now. He can only summon special summon once. He's not going to be able to go into anything else from this point. So he has to go to battle phase now, which is fine. He's going to destroy some of my cards, but he's not going to be able to kill me this turn with what he has on the field. So he attacks with Odd Eyes, doing double damage to me, and then he destroys Aerial for some reason. I'm surprised because I would have thought that he would have tried to destroy Winder. he could have destroyed Winder, and if I'm not mistaken, isn't Oath Dragon Caller a level 7 monster? I don't know what he's in his deck, obviously, but if it was me, I would have used the 2 level 7 monsters in the field, gone into Odd Eyes Absolute, and then used Odd Eyes Absolute to get myself to Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon. But maybe he's not playing that, so all the better for me. In my turn here, we've got more than enough resources. We drew Dark Grepher at the moment, so we can't really use Dark Grepher right now, so we're just going to attack with App Cologne, Construct, and now attacking directly with Winder, doing a nice bit of damage to Killer 4709, and then we're going to pass for turn back to him. He still has his scales, which is always really good. We have Predator Plant Vertex Anaconda at the ready, but really we have all of our quote-unquote boss monsters on the field right now. There's no point wasting our resources and burning through them. We've kind of used a lot of cards on our deck already. We may as well slow it down and wait for our opponent to try and get rid of our cards and then claim advantage for that. So Killer is on to turn number 6, has his Pendulum Scales and is going to definitely go for another Pendulum Summon. So, but at this time, because Nightmare Phoenix is not on the field anymore, he's only going to be able to summon one monster from the extra monster deck, and he's going to go for this. Odd Eyes hits the field again, and we'll see if he has anything in his hand that could be summoned. It doesn't seem like he does, so Odd Eyes is going to get to the field, and it's going to attack. It's going to attack into Winder. Yep, not too worried about that. I take 600 damage. Winder hits the field, and now Winder's effect will trigger, and I'm going to be able to get back a Spell or Trap card. He summoned Odd Eyes from the extra deck, so we may as well go for Shadow Fusion, because we can use cards in our main deck as materials for the Fusion Summon instead of the field and the hand, so yeah, why not? It's just more power to us. So we draw into Mathematician here, and at this point I'm genuinely thinking to myself, what cards do I even have left in my deck to send? I play Shadow Fusion first, trying to think about what we have left. I've already got Construct on the field, I've already got Apcolon on the field, and I kind of don't know what's in my deck right now. So I'm just going to complete the cycle. I'm going to go for Winder. So we're going to use Winder, and it seems like the only card we have left in our deck really is Wendy. So yeah, yikes, we got to kind of win this game soon. We've burnt through a lot of our monsters very, very quickly, which is surprising considering we're playing so many traps in this deck. And so we summon out Winder one more time, and he thinks he's the right on the wall, and he quits there. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this breakdown and demonstration and look into a very much beloved archetype. This deck was one of the most popular decks in the game. Konami did a poll and said to people, what do you want another structure deck on? And people said Shaddolls, so a lot of people love this archetype, and this is my way of looking into it. Hopefully the breakdown, me kind of doing it more for beginners, was really helpful for those who are new to the game, and if so, do let me know. I always listen to feedback, and I really appreciate the feedback we've gotten so far. But as always guys, thank you so much for watching my videos. I do greatly appreciate it. I'll see you soon. Take care.